I have seemed to be elected as the host for today's presentation, and just wanted to remind everyone that about uh, what we showed last time, first of the month, for our Cosmic Voices session, which was a very early channeling of Richard Scobee, who was the commander of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And it was a very early channeling by Jeanne from back in the end of 1986, barely 11 months after the tragedy. And so, Jeanne, before we get on to what we're going to be presenting today, do you have any reflections going back to that experience of, or actually both you and Regina going back to the experience of those very early channelings of the Challenger crew?
Well, yes. Funny you should ask me that, Dan. Um, in preparation for the book that Regina and I are working on, um, we kind of we got an outline and we've done various writing, and I started off with in terms of filling stories in, because I've had stories started but I haven't filled them in, and so I chose Richard Scobee, considering last month that was a big theme of our gathering. And so I finished some writing, but then I found some writing that I had done a year previous to this year, so it was 2023. And I just want to read a couple of paragraphs to you all that kind of tell more about what the experience was like for both me and for Richard. So if that's okay, I'm going to read them right now. It's
Sure.
and not too much. It hopefully will not be um, too much to have to listen to. Anyway, I want to preface it with saying that um, prior to the crew members getting ready for launch, NASA provides them with this time before the launch when their families gather. They have I feel some kind of house on the beach there down there in Florida, and the family members gather and they, have a barbecue and all that kind of stuff so they can spend time together before they have to go into, quarantine before they launch. And there's a record of this. This is documented that um, Richard Scobee, after dinner, took his wife for a little walk on the beach and started singing to her one of his favorite songs, which was "The Last Farewell" by, no, I'm not going to remember, Roger Whittaker. And if you listen to the lyrics of that song, it really describes what was about to happen to them. And certainly, I don't feel that he was consciously aware of that that moment, but it's very poignant and meaningful. So when you have some free time, you might look up, if you don't remember, Roger Whittaker's song "The Last Farewell." Anyway, that's what I titled this little bit of writing. It has been over 38 years, and I still remember the first communication from Commander Scobee like it was yesterday. Richard, or Scobee as he liked to be called, was reserved, cautious when he first channeled through me. He wasn't at all certain of what was going on. After all, he and his 6 crew members had just lost their physical reality, due to the explosion of the Challenger. Here he was sitting with a woman called Jeannie, whom he had never met before, surrounded by 2 other people who were trying to talk him into some sort of comfort after the huge trauma of death that he had just experienced. In order to appear commanderish, he remained careful with his words, trying to sort through all the debris in his mind. He had no idea what I was really all about, whether I was to be believed or just tolerated as if he was in the midst of a very bad dream. I felt every bit of Scobee's angst, every fear, worry, distrust of us, and of what was going on. He didn't know the protocol for such an experience and was rather put out that there had been no training for the possibility of his death or for the death of his crew. He had to rely on his own feelings and perceptions about the world beyond the physical, and so far it wasn't matching up with his beliefs. However, he was oddly comfortable as he began to tell us about his first experience after the shuttle was lost. He began to relax as recalled where he seemed to land and to express his gratitude for the spirits who came to guide him. He wondered if the others had a similar experience. After that first night channeling Commander Scobee, I found myself having a series of knowings, which I can only describe as feelings and visions gathered from his consciousness. I registered completely with his sadness and sense of loss he felt in being taken away from his family in the prime of his life. As he shared with us, it was clear that he felt betrayed by NASA and by those who had his life, as well as the life of other crew members, in their hands. It was just too much to absorb at once, and so he retreated that the other crew members could share their own stories and feelings about what took place. For me, channeling these different personalities, I was struck by the independence and rugged presentation of each individual crew member. In the past, I had channeled maybe one or two spirits in a session. I had never experienced so many spirits at one time. It was exhausting, but strangely amazing to me. I had no idea I was capable of holding so many energies at one time. After that second night, my husband and I took the dog for a walk. It was the 29th of January, and we lived in Michigan. It was frigid cold outside with a full moon. There had been a slight warm up during the day, so the snow had begun to melt, only to freeze up again in the cold night air. Our feet made noisy crunching sounds as we walked over the snow covering the athletic field of the local elementary school. We walked that way almost every night, but this was an entirely different evening. It was almost midnight, a very late start to our evening stroll. It didn't even take the energy of a stroll, it was more of a what just happened walk. We were crunching the ground covered in ice and snow in a manner which spoke of a brisk walk with the intention of trying to clear our heads, regain our personal balance. We were both exhilarated and profoundly overwhelmed. Exhilarated because the crew had been brought to us, overwhelmed because we had no idea where this whole experience would take us, and that was a bit frightening. This is why I have held this story so close to my heart for all these years. These souls promised to stay until their message of peace and reconciliation could be told. It is our determination to make sure that as many as possible know the true story. It isn't the story of deceit and incompetence. Rather, it is the story that we never die. It is the knowledge that there are huge amounts of communications from many mediums all over the world, which clearly define that we do not die, that we simply lose our physical body. This truth changes everything: how we perceive life and death, how we should choose how we interact with others, and most importantly, practice grace and forgiveness in our everyday living. For if there is no death, then there surely is connection to those who have passed, as well as to the experiences of other time and places. The worldview changes. The need to control nations, civilizations, and different cultures no longer can be valid. Commander Scobee was hit squarely in the face of his own living when he found himself sitting in the basement of a medium named Jeanne who helped him to understand that we never die. We simply change shape. So I thought I'd just read that to you.
Thank you, Jeanne. Regina, do you have any reflections on that very early time when you first connected with the Challenger crew?
Yes, I do. I know exactly. And it was really the first time I channeled unexpectedly. And that happened on my birthday, January 31st. So it was a couple of days after the actual explosion. And I was with Marcel Vogel the Crystal Man,
Yeah.
the inventor of what is he? Liquid quartz, the quartz crystal, digital. Anyway, I was with him and we were playing and testing all sorts of odds and ends and playing with energy and, using all sorts of machines and his crystals and doing that. And we were in a dark room and he was showing me his crystals. And next thing, Scobee was in me, just as fast as can be. And I didn't know who it was actually until he spoke. And I literally was in the command module. And that was just, it was the first time I'd ever channeled. It wasn't expected. It wasn't something I was trying to do because it just blew me out of the water. And all of a sudden I'm this man and I'm actually outside of the shuttle and looking at it and the O-rings. I'm inspecting it and I'm pointing out and expressing and sharing all this information with Marcel, and they're scribbling it down. And he didn't even bat an eye. He took this all in stride, thinking this was normal. I had no idea. And I felt like I was pushed right out of my body and on the opposite side of the room. And I was watching myself from that perspective in a chair. And it was just, it's so real. It's yesterday. It's now.
So, Regina, so Krista was not the first one to come through. It was Scobee, you say.
For me, yes, it was Scobee. Yeah. No, I didn't have Krista until a year later.
Krista was first with me and then Scobee, but for her, it was Scobee first.
Scobee first. And Scobee came through quite a few times after that with the foundation and with Bob Chaclet, Bill Goff in their private homes. And those weren't taped at all, those first years. That first year wasn't taped until we were actually at a meeting of the Foundation of Mind Being Research. So
Right.
that was
These folks were the founders of the FMBR, all well placed Silicon Valley engineers and scientists.
pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
It was really wild. That was the whole thing that's the thing about this. The Spirit really wanted to talk about the synchronicity of all this, Dan. Because Jeanne and I didn't know anybody who knew anybody, but it's always that 6 degree, of separation of Kevin Bacon or something like that. And just the circumstances, all of a sudden people started just coming into the lives. The puzzles started interacting, the pieces, and falling into place. And Jeanne knew some of these people, but then of course one tells another, and next thing I know, we're involved with the foundation. And it just snowballed. And it wasn't until much later that we actually realized that this was all being orchestrated and we were just going along. And that's where Seth was involved. It's just Seth was doing the orchestration of this whole thing, or assisting in this whole thing.
Jeannie, would you like to say just at least a few words about the influence of Seth? Now, you had already been connected with him for some time at that point, hadn't you?
Yes. When I first met my husband to be in Everly educator, he just within the first week of our meeting, he went to the bookstore and got all the Seth books because I hadn't heard of him. And he left them for me under my porch and called me up and said, "Oh, I left all these books for you." "Oh, great. I have a little kid. I'm sure I'm going to have time to read those." And that was the Seth introduction. And I can't remember now specific details about the connection that we both had to Seth, but very much felt that energy with us at times. I don't remember doing any conscious channeling of Seth energies. And it took me a while to read the books because they're pretty thick, but it certainly just really put me into a different level. And I'm sure, he appeared perhaps when I was doing readings and such with others. But then that was 1979, and it wasn't until 86, when the Challenger situation took place, that Seth really became really a force in our lives of very constant attention to us, and would speak to us about certain situations once we started channeling the crew so much, and would speak to certain things that was happening in the government, or would speak to certain things that were happening with the families, or was giving us evidential information that we didn't even know we needed. And that isn't always like Seth, but he, like Regina was saying, was very much a part of the consciousness of this whole project. And also, too, then through the FMBR connections, we were connected to Senator Pell's office in Rhode Island, and he had a whole paranormal research department there. And they got wind of us, and that was probably the worst thing that could have happened, because then the government knew that we were working with the Challenger energies, and that was not supposed to happen, because there was an astronaut on the crew that was trained in remote viewing, to be able to be in touch with one of their remote viewer psychics, to, in case comm lines went down, they could be there to help the crew. And so when that didn't happen, that all sorts of red flags went up. And Seth was actually talking to us about that, and we're like, yeah, right, whatever, very naivete about the government and what it would be doing. And because we just wanted to believe we were doing something good. All we wanted to do is help these people over. Neither Regina or myself had any agenda of, oh, wow, this is neat, we're going to do this and that. No, it was just sitting in our basement, doing a meditation, trying to help them over. And then this whole storyline emerged, just huge pieces. And we were in the thick of it, so we couldn't always see every bit of it. But one of the things that I remember still after all these years that really stands out is, and I might have mentioned this on another podcast, but we moved from Michigan to Western New York in 1987. And we had purchased the house, but escrow wasn't up, and we didn't get through escrow until October of that school year. So we were just kind of staying in different places until we get into our house. And the day that we could get into our home was the day that Marcia Jarvis, Greg's widow, was there at the SUNY, which is State University of New York campus in Buffalo, to dedicate the engineering wing for her husband Greg, because that's where he'd gone to school for his I think it was his master's. Anyway, we were determined to go. It was open to the public, and literally we had just emptied the U-Haul truck into the living room and the kitchen area with all the boxes. I mean, it was just crazy. We found somebody that knew somebody that would be good to take care of the kids, because we had 4 kids. They were a little older by then, but not by much. And we just said, goodbye, we'll see you later. And Seth had told us earlier, when we were still in Michigan, that all the families were shown pictures of us, who were channeling, of me, not Regina so much because she hadn't been recorded yet, but of me. And we're like, yeah, whatever, Seth, sure. Why would we be important? And, just warning us. So when we showed up at that event that day, there must have been 1,000 people underneath that tent. And as I said, it was October. The weather was okay. It was a little drizzly, but it wasn't, snowbound or anything. And there were 4 of us. There was myself, my husband, my friend Roy, and our friend Jeanne. And because they had moved with us we'd only known each other a year, and they had moved with us. They believed so much in what we were doing that they packed their lives up and joined us. At any rate, we waited till a lot of people cleared out the dedications, the stories, this and that, until most of the people were gone. And the last night before this, Greg was after me to write a letter to Marcia, and I just felt very uncomfortable because I was still very uncertain of my skills in this big arena. It would have been wonderful or easier if it was just somebody that was just a regular person that wasn't known to anybody, and you're giving evidential information to them about their father who just passed, and you hit all the buttons and they're very happy and they feel calm and very satisfied and grateful. That's one kind of level of mediumship. But to be in this type of arena and all of a sudden step in with the big boys was like, it was overwhelming, and I just didn't trust myself in terms of knowing that my information would come through correctly, given the mind that we were just moving and everything. But I wrote it anyway, and as we were walking to meet her and the crowds were thinning, of the four of us, she didn't look at anyone else. She saw my face right away, and she walked right up to me. And that's when I went, oh my God, Seth was right. She went right up to me, and I just said to her, my name is Jeanne Love. I'm so happy to meet you. I'm sorry that under these circumstances, whatever I mumbled, I don't know. And I said, but I just have a little letter for you. Thank you for taking it in. And then thank you again. And then off we walked. First of all, we were just blown away that she would give us any time after there were thousands of people there. But that she picked me out of the four of us was very clear that she did. That's when we recognized, oh, we were in a different world now. And then 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, I got a handwritten note from her because I had left my address that she'd mailed. And she said, none of what you said was true. And this person who I had named, how would I know this person's name, never would do that. And then another name that Greg gave me, well, he would not do that either. So she already had confirmed 2 to 3 evidential things, which were the names of these friends of theirs that I had no inkling of who they were. And she went on and on. She point by point denied absolutely everything. And it was because she was told to, because I was a crackpot, and that was just silly and blah blah blah. And FMER people, Bob Shacklet and Bill were like, well, why didn't you save a copy of the letter? I said, look, I had a hard enough time just handing that to her. The circumstances, all the moving, it was just terrifying. So I did the best I could. I don't know where that letter is now after all the moving I've done over the years, but I found it so fascinating that she would deny everything and that she would take the time to give me a handwritten note. Who does that? She was getting thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of mail. She could have just ignored, but the government felt that I needed to be stopped. We needed to be squished early. And that was our first indication that, something was, there was another situation too with Senator Pell's office. But anyway, I don't want to take more time, but that was one circumstance where Seth was definitely part of it, giving us advice, directing us, giving us some GPS on this, and it just blew us away.
Thanks, Jeanne. Regina, just back to you for a moment before we move on. What you had also had a concerning experience, at least one at one time, involving the government. Do you feel like mentioning at least a little bit about that?
No.
No? Okay.
We will save that for another time.
Okay.
I think it would be nice to go on to the the Kalpana. The difference in, first of all, I think what I'd like to share is that, again, regarding the synchronicity of it, is that both Jeanne and I, though we were channeling and 1,500 miles away, we were both getting the same information from the same astronauts. I was um, I was channeling it to Bob and Edie and Bill Goff and other members. Like I said, that was before they were taping it. And then we were just at their house and having lunch, and then we'd sit down, and all of a sudden things came through. And one of the very interesting ones was Richard Feynman came through right after his death. And I didn't even know who he was. And he started talking to Bill and telling him about the astronauts. Oh, yeah, they're all here with me. And I didn't even know who Richard Feynman. I had to go look him up afterwards. But it comes, it was just really very fascinating. All these things that were starting to happen and the synchronicity of everything that was going on. So, and Jeanne and I, we only had the weekends to share, and it was only usually maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks we'd have time to connect with each other on the telephone, because that's when it was cheapest to do so. But it was always amazing, amazing how things were happening, and that was why I couldn't deny it. I kept wanting to say, this isn't real, this isn't real, this just isn't real, this isn't me, I don't want to do this, but it was still happening, and it's still unbelievable to me. But what happened is over that time, the more and more the different entities came through, we were learning to trust ourselves. They were learning to trust us. And as well as we were having an exchange of information and dialogue about what it was like on the other side for them, as well as what Spiritism is like for us and how our belief system is. It was as if we were all in the same classroom educating each other. It was a delightful experience. And the more we did it, the more, I don't know, it was just a tremendous satisfaction within. It felt this was long past a rescue. It really became a point of hope. It really became a point of connection with the others. And I didn't want to share. The only person who knew the depth of this involvement was Jeannie. For me, as far as how much they became our friends who sat in the car with us, and we talked to them on the way by ourselves, driving here, driving there. They were always talking to us, and I mean, I lived in Santa Cruz, the capital of Yahoo, or Yoo-hoo, or Woohoo. Yahoo. But it
was woo-woo.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, then I lived in the woo-woo capital. And I didn't dare share this information with anybody out there, because everybody was a psychic and their mistress. I didn't dare. I shared it all it was all with the science people. And most of the time, a lot of times I was actually plugged in, plugged up. They had what are those?
Electrodes.
Thank you. With all my body, my heart, my sweat glands, my brain, all sorts of things. And I was connected to biofeedback machines and stuff, all while I was under. And so it was just, to me, I felt like I was learning about all of this with the astronauts.
Right. Thanks.
Well,
Thanks,
can
Regina.
I add, Dan, can I add when it talks about the synchronicity? Chris, I'm just remembering
Sure,
things.
go ahead, please.
God, senior brain moment, 2 items. Sounds like first syllable. One of the things that was very fascinating to both Tom and I, after the first week or two, when they had the memorial service for the crew in Houston, and of course the crew was just reeling from all of this, but they were there in attendance, and I could see them where they were with various families and the groups of people, And there was this whole line of experience that I was watching where Ellison was, where Mike Smith was, where Krista was. And of course now those notes are gone. But what was fascinating that I do remember is about a month and a half later, I went back to South Carolina, where we had moved from. We moved from South Carolina to Michigan, and the Unity Church there that we had helped to start. Mary Ann Finch was the minister, just a lovely woman. And so I did some workshops down there, and I met some, of course, fascinating people. One of the gals that I met was a psychic that was local who was really good. And we started talking about the memorial service. And she said, "Oh, I have to tell you what I saw." And everything that she saw, and I hadn't shared with her anything yet, everything she saw is exactly what I saw at the time I was watching the services. So, how many other people were having experiences that profound? It was uncanny what she saw and what I saw. It's like we were sitting in the same bleachers watching the event together. But even if you have eyewitness accounts, they're not necessarily that precise. And that was one of the other many things along the way that was just incredible. And then, of course, Regina had said we were channeling. It was the days you didn't have cell phones, and the phone long distance was expensive, and we were young married people that didn't have a lot of extra cash. So Sunday nights, Sunday afternoons or all day Sunday when you talk to people. I had started a conversation with Ellison on Azuka. Well, actually, it started with me, and I can't remember now what he was information he was giving. But he was telling something about probably the workings of NASA and having to do with the shuttle and such. And I don't think that we recorded that. There's a lot of stuff that did not get recorded. Anyway, he was going on and on and on, and then he goes, "Well, that's enough of that." We had spent like 2 hours, put that away, and then unbeknownst to me, until Regina and I talked to each other, she said, "Oh, I was channeling Ellison," and he said this, this, and this. I go, "Oh my God." He literally stopped with me and continued with her a few days later. It was brilliant and awe-inspiring. Anyway, thank you. I wanted to share that.
One thing that I think probably should be mentioned, and by the way, Wendy, when I'm speaking, I don't seem to be visible on the main screen. I don't know why that is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. My understanding from the sessions that I attended were that on each shuttle crew there was one individual who had been trained as a psychic, and that this was unknown to the rest of the crew at the time. This is a highly secret operation. And then after the Challenger and the Columbia were destroyed, that the crews who had been basically had become families. That there was some friction because it was only after they passed that they discovered that one of their family members had been trained in this secret operation. Now that's my understanding of it. Regina, you seem to be nodding. Can you want to say something about that?
Well, I don't know if there was friction, but I think they were surprised. I think the surprise is the rest of the crew goes, "What? You knew about this stuff?" It was kind of like that attitude.
Oh, okay.
And it was more about remote viewing and remote contact for if they had lost communication, on the dark side of the moon. But which they did lose communication, they just weren't expecting it through death. So that's a whole nother training. They didn't take that lesson.
Okay. So we should probably segue into Kalpana. She was the mission specialist on the Columbia. She was born in India. As I understand it, she was already a psychic and was also picked as the psychic trainee on the Columbia. And from what I recall, she said that she kind of faked it to make them believe that they were actually training her. So she'd get a few things wrong once in a while. But she was already there. And partly as a consequence, I suppose, of her personal training and also of her background, her culture, her culture of origin. And that she also had the easiest passing. Now, I have this video of you channeling her briefly down in one of our Silicon Valley meetings. And I think this would probably be a good time to play that video if I can share my screen.
Greetings. This is Kalpana, and I'm going to open her eyes. Ah, that's better. Hi. 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 Hi, Marion. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Anna. Danique. Ellen, can I see your eyes? Hi. This is KC. Everybody calls me KC. This experience isn't that bad for me. I did do exactly what Rick said. I checked out. I said, forget this. I had a premonition, though, I was leaving. So as much as I had a wonderful first run, and this is my second trip, and I'll tell you what, when you get to the stars, you don't want to come back. And as we were entering atmosphere, I said, okay, we're done here. So I just left. I left and joined the crew, just as Rick said. And it was heavenly. I went right over. So as Greg was saying, the next one who was trained with the trying to contact NASA and stuff. That was me, because I was the easiest one they could work with, and I pretty much had that skill before they knew it. And in fact, I faked the test so that I would have quite a few wrong as they were training me, because I didn't want them to know what I knew. And so I became the wonderful guinea pig to get trained with all of their remote work and remote communication back to NASA. And I left some clever little messages with them, but I really didn't pay much attention to them. Most of my messages were left for my husband, JP, and for my family back home in India. They knew I was over, and they were fine. They felt me immediately, and they were really pleased that I came to see them right away. So that was the best part of all this. I got to go home really fast. I got to fly around, as you would say. I got to be omnipotent everywhere, all at the same time. What a kick. Kick ass. Forget that shuttle. As soon as you go without this body, you get to go everywhere. That's the best part. It was so much fun. It is so much fun. So for me, I just wanted to let you know that my experience was not like Rick's. Not at all. And I have been to every one of your houses. I love your home. I love your home. I love your altar. I love your home. And I really am grateful that Jerry got my message that you were to come and be a part of this group. And please let your wife know that everything is good. Everything is good. We are watching carefully. And all is good. Please. Thank you, Dr. Jeanne, for contacting Lalik. He holds a great gift for all of us here. And as a crew, we needed his presence here.
I need you to understand that there's a cording that happens with our group and with all of you. And we each are corded with this group as a whole. And Lalit creates a bridge for us to move easily back and forth as we travel. This is a hard concept, and Lalit does not understand it either. But we will share more with him later. And my time is going to be up. They're going to pull me out real fast. But I want you to know that not everybody's experience was like Rick's. This was bad. I'm so sorry, Rick. I'm so sorry. But anyway, I thank you very much for letting me just show my face a few minutes and let me look in everybody's eyes. It's really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for letting me come into all of your homes. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Damn, that was hard to watch.
It was beautiful. I could feel her right away. It was just wonderful.
That was one of my most profound experiences of being present at your sessions.
Thanks, Dan. So I want to say something there. She's referring to Rick. She's talking about Rick Husband, the commander of the Columbia shuttle. And he had come through. This was an afternoon session, the morning of the same day. And this was done in 2019. I'd never brought in any of the shuttle from Columbia crew before, so this was all new for me too. And each one of their personalities was very different. And this was for Jeanne, as Jeanne was here next to me on the other side, and she was also bringing in crew members on that day of the Columbia. But Rick Husband came through earlier, and as a commander, I experienced his nightmarish trauma trying to get the ship under control before it before it just blew up as it re-entered into the Earth's atmosphere. And it was a pretty bad nightmare of channeling, because I had all of his visuals and his physiology was going physical. My heartbeat, blood pressure was soaring through the roof. It was frightening. And I was very upset with Spirit afterwards and had to go into the room and give them a word or two. And I was assured I was okay. I didn't feel okay, but I was assured I was okay. And it was frightening because of what it did to my body. So anyway, after it all calmed down, she basically came through me and I could feel it. There was a tremendous healing afterwards with her presence in my body. And it was like all of my organs were getting reset from the amount of adrenaline that had gone through from the channeling earlier. So I just so that's why she was saying that she wasn't like Rick, going to be like Rick, because it was in reference to Rick Husband.
Now, Regina, wasn't there ultimately a purpose to your experience? Now, as I understand it, that it was something that had actually been agreed to on a subtle level, and that it was healing for Rick, who had held on to those feelings for all these years of Earth time anyway.
Years of Earth time, but no time at all in their perspective. But right, yes, it was healing the trauma. And just as a person has PTSD, he was continually reliving the fact that he couldn't save the ship, save the shuttle, as well as just all of those traumas, all the things that go along with it.
Mm.
And so that in itself was a real rescue. That was a true rescue in that way of rescue, separating that person from the spirit so that the spirit could truly release itself and no longer carry the trauma. And the hard part is, I continue to live with the trauma. So just like Jeanne has had the experience of Krista's trauma and the first nights when those guys came through, it just as I see exactly the same scenes from Scobee when he first came through. I have those memories now in my conscious, not in my brain, it's in my consciousness, it's part of my system, good or bad. And I've worked hard to separate that and to put it into a box. But at times it definitely comes forward, especially when I'm looking at this like this. And it's not bad. It's an experience that has taught us a great deal. It's taught us so much.
What wasn't part of this that his healing and his release was expedited by it being able to be released physically?
Yes. Yes.
So you were providing a sort of a grounding for him.
I was providing the vehicle. I
Yeah.
was the vehicle. Yeah. Completely the vehicle. Yeah. So anyway.
Is that this is the only instance that I'm aware of, I'm sure there may be others, where this sort of healing has taken place in quite this way with this intensity. I mean, I was there as well, and I recall the stress that you had to endure in this. And I wonder how often this sort of thing happens with others, where someone on this side offers to help discharge that trauma and that energy.
I don't know. It's happened a couple of times since then for other entities I've worked with, but nothing like Rick's or Krista's. Because I experienced Krista's once she was underwater in the water, and that was pretty horrible.
And we know that Krista as well had actually reached out to many mediums. We know of several, at least one other personally, and I've heard of a number of others at the time. So that was and this is on the part of someone who apparently had no context for contacting a medium.
Right.
It just sort of happened automatically by the intensity of the experience, presumably.
Well, and I think a lot of the experience, the intensity for the Challenger people crew to be coming through and affected so many individuals, so many mediums or non-mediums, or didn't know they were mediums type things, because the energy of the global community was in such mournful tragedy, feeling such a connection. There were so many children watching this television screens, or so many adults, so many people had emotionally invested in this whole thing. So I think that, and the same with the Columbia crew. It happened the same as the Columbia, but they broke up over 3 states and thousands of pieces. So it just affected so many people. So yeah. Going into, I was going to say, Pearl Harbor's the same way, or any other battlefield. If you walk in, if the field hasn't been cleared, you can experience the battle or the trauma or the torture or the event of so many, and it's a very viable emotion.
Well, it's all this neurological imprinting that's going on. I still work with people who have come incarnate and clearing their lives or a lot of the Civil War and still holding that energetic from whatever trauma they, as a soldier, experienced, whether they're killed or they lost a limb. I mean, any of this violent living is, creates that field. And I know there have been concerted efforts amongst healing groups to go into the land and the various parts of the United States to heal that matrix and to remove that violence and to bring a sense of peace. Certainly, Regina and I have done that up there where the Indian Wars have played themselves out in the Nebraska, South Dakota area. That's another whole story. But absolutely, when there's that energetic imprint, it needs to be cleared. Doing it in the physical is a gift because not everybody has that ability to, come through that way and clear their trauma. Seth is here.
Welcome, Seth.
I know you have question and answers set up. I'm just announcing that he's here. And if he has a moment, he would like to talk a little bit about the synchronicity of spirit.
Certainly has my permission. Go
Good,
for it.
He's driving me crazy.
Wendy, is that good?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm not going to bring him in full direct channeling as Sally so nicely edited on the stuff that I did with Gary and Sally's program, Soul Explorers. It's more of I love the phrase you used, Sally, about the consciousness of Seth. Today's a little stronger because there's so many of you that are able to support the energy of Seth because he's very rambunctious. He's intense. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, I can't sit still. What's going on? So Seth is just want to come in just a little for a few moments. And he's such, I don't mean this in a negative way, but he's such a showman at times. He really doesn't want to be seen as anything other than someone that comes in with information and you can either take it or leave it. He doesn't want people to worship him or, become a Sethetarian like I am, but it's for our benefit so we can move forward. And in talking about the synchronicity of spirit, and this is really Seth energy now, he's saying that all of us that are on this program right now have had so many synchronistic experiences with spirit. And sometimes you're very aware of them, and sometimes you take them out of context and don't see the connect the dots. And so Seth is really wanting to remind all of you to connect the dots this week, connect the dots in the next month, the next year, because there are more dots present, more interactions and intersections than you realize. Even with all of you, sometimes you get so used to it, you don't really monitor it in a way that actually builds more space for you to excel. He said, when you connect the dots and allow yourself to see the patterns that have been set out from you, then you're actually able to see the continuity of your pathway and where you're going. He says with the group that was channeling with Challenger, a lot of it hit them in the faces, but they were also dealing with all this amazing energy and this trauma from the experiences, so they had a really hard time separating themselves from the trauma to be able to see and step back and have an observational platform to see the energy that was there for them to recognize, to be able then to weave all of it together and put it all together. Now, we knew this was going to happen. We knew there was going to be problems with this, given the fact that they had never had these kinds of experiences in this lifetime before. But we knew we did it anyway because we had all agreed to this. And that's the other thing about this is our agreement to these kind of things taking place. And that was very hard for the Challenger crew originally to accept that they had agreed to this, because who in their right mind would agree to being blown up in front of 8 billion people across the globe? However, the importance of it was all part of this, what we were calling this Project Hope. And the Project Hope is putting together all these pieces of synchronicity and evidential information to show the continuity of life so that people could relax and go about evolving into their space and evolving through the universe and their contracts with various spaces and time. And so this is something that's been lost on this particular planet, not because it's dark and light, but because the dark and light has gotten a little off base and the the balance has been lost. And so that's why so many of you are coming in to help remind, the population of the history of this planet, what it's for, what it stands for, where it's slated to go, and how individual it all is at the same time. So this is the synchronicity of spirit that needs to be paid attention to every single day. Because when you see that and you align it and you put the dots together, you no longer feel like it's so tough. It's tough when we only align with the negative, whether it's what we're doing research wise, what we're doing when we listen to the news, people in Australia listening to what's happening to the United States. That's kind of toxic. But it's one thing if it's informational, but it comes to be much more toxic very quickly than any of you really are prepared for, because it's just eased its way into the global matrix and the global pattern to be aware and to be waiting for the shoes to drop, for the darkness to come in, for everything to fall apart, to be having warring here and warring here and warring here, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, rather than connecting the dots and seeing the synchronicity that all of you have created. And you have to take the blinders off and listen differently, pay attention differently, because the synchronicity of spirit is of your own making, whether you're on a mission with the crew of the Challenger or the Columbia or with NASA, or you're in another situation with healing modalities or spiritual communication through electronics, or whatever your area of expertise or where you feel connected to in your mission. Pay attention, connect the dots. Sit for a moment rather than just clearing yourself, which is a wonderful tool. But after you've cleared yourself, then sit. Okay, I can sit here and meditate and just get all expanded, which is wonderful. Or it can also facilitate a connection to this life right now here and connect the dots. And Seth really wants the ability for all of you who are very awakened and very proficient to connect the dots and become so much more conscious of the day that you have already created before you awakened. What do you think you do at night? Some of you have already got a playbook in and you just read the book when you're out of your body and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do today, like a cosmic day timer. Others of you have long-term things and you're still on that process and that project. Some of you have gotten like, oh, squirrel, I want to go there, which is fine too, because all of it can, if potentially, lead to where you're headed if you connect the dots. There are no wrong roads to travel. Some may be more difficult than the others, but they all lead to what you have in your cosmic book. It's your dot-to-dot book. I remember Jeanne is a teacher, so she's all these things I get in her energy when I get into her. All the ways she taught kids in the classroom and arranged things for children to learn. And part of it was, dot-to-dot pages. Although she didn't do a lot of it, that was very much a part of certain times. And it's like, well, that's the same format for any adult. Connect the dots. And it isn't just, oh, well, of course that would have happened. That dot there, that dot there. Of course that would have happened. It's the other subtle dots that perhaps have just fleeted and flitted across your membrane of sight. And it was almost so quickly gone that you almost didn't pay attention to it. And that's why you clear yourself, in a quiet space for a while, or you do it at night, or you do it in the middle of the day, whatever time of the day works for you, connect the dots. Anyway, that's just a sampling of the intensity of the synchronicity of any kind of huge situation like this. I know working with Eileen Garrett, when she was channeling the airman who wouldn't die, the dirigible that went down, and she was so able to clue in with the captain of the dirigible that she too was in the cockpit and saw all the instruments and gave specific details, because that captain was so profoundly disturbed that he was still in that space of flying that machine. And then he related all the information through her about what was taking place as per what he saw was going on. It seems incredibly improbable, but the energetic is so intense that it imprints and leaves a space there. And some can be cleared over time, but some stays. That's why you have these apparitions of ghosts on a certain night when the weather and the climate is conducive is showing a lady who's died on the side of the road and then gets in the car, and everybody knows she's the ghost of whatever. You guys know all this. Connect the dots. There's more synchronicity there than you really, really recognize. And that is what is the foundational impact of your daily living and living here with the essence of who you are as a spiritual being. And I'm going to stop there because I didn't buy enough bandwidth for the day. Good day, my friends.
Thank you, Seth.
Whew.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Wow.
Wow.
You'll need to nap later. You'll need to sleep later.
That
Oh,
was a surprise. I wasn't expecting it that at all.
Oh, I thought
Oh,
he
well.
was.
well, it's probably,
Questions.
yeah, right. Probably
That's
long
what-
past time that we ask for questions from.
People are asleep.
Are there any questions from anyone?
Yes, thank you. I'm sort of blown away by this realization that people here can hear the trauma of people who have passed on. Literally hear them. This is because this is not what you're taught. This is not it, because when they've gone, they've got to do it there. But actually, when they are expressing it and hearing it, and you are feeling it for them, it's just fascinating. Thank you.
And just on that point, it seems to me that to try to do that is not for the faint of heart. That
Or body.
No,
or body,
yes.
and with the best of intentions, we still want to take care.
Yes,
Well-
and I said, Regina, you were so affected by it.
I am affected by it. Absolutely, Hyacinth. And the thing is, before Rick, husband was coming in, I could, both Jean and I were getting ourselves together and doing our deep breathing, and I could see them all lined up behind us. I mean, or next to us. They were like, boom, 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 boom. Everybody's taking their card, and I kept saying, "Go to Jean, go to Jean, get Jean first, do Jean first." And I asked later why I ended up. Why was it me who got Rick? Why did I have to do it? Why couldn't Jean have done it? Because I was a little miffed, And I heard clear as well, because it would have killed her.
Hmm.
It would have.
Yeah.
We did not know at the time that Jean had already had a heart attack.
I had had a major heart attack in the LAD, which is the widowmaker, and by all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be here right now. But I was one of 20% of people that had a third artery on around that part of the heart, and that's what saved me. But I'm a diabetic, and I didn't have any feeling of it, and yeah. So
Yeah. But we
Yes.
found out later that that was the reason why, and my body could take it. And I'm grateful for that experience, for the understanding and the knowledge. And I'm also very grateful for the trust that came with it from Commander Husband, because it took a lot of trust for him to come in and do this. And it was, yeah. And later on, way later on, we'll share the other things. But we didn't want to share all the trauma and dark sides of things. We wanted to share the joy. There's a great deal of joy when we have the opportunity to connect with these individuals. A great, immense joy, especially when they share their healing process with us. It just blows me away. It really does.
And I need to say this, I see your hands, but some people might say, well, why would you let yourself go through all that? We had to. It was a contract. This wasn't something that we were.
We promised them.
Pardon me?
We promised them.
Exactly. And so, this was not something that, anyway, within that, of course, we learned a lot of things because I had the crystal trauma, which was very incredible compared in lots of ways to what my husband went through. But it was our promise, is what we came in to do. And there are other spirits out there that will want to come through you and drag you down the primrose lane and promise you things, and they're not necessarily authentic, nor do you need to mess with them. And that's the difference between knowing what you need to participate with and what you need to let go. And that's a whole nother topic. But we did consciously make that decision once it all started, to, look at our contracts and, okay, we have to, this is a go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth?
I just want to say, Regina and Ginny, I'm in awe, absolute awe of what you've done and what you've gone through. I sat yesterday and read all the transcripts, and I had no idea, absolutely no idea of how long it had gone on and how much there was. Have you still got that relationship with the crews, both crews? Is it ongoing?
They're with us now.
Exactly.
And are you continuing to learn more about the afterlife and the processes they've been gone through? Are you going to share that hopefully with us?
Yes.
Well, yes.
Not right now, not everything now, because really they've taught us so freaking much.
But we've also channeled the Native American and indigenous grandmothers extensively. Dan has tape of that. We've learned from a range of beings that have come through us. And as much as Regina said, we had all the negative, we've also had the incredible positive. And it was meant that Hyacinth, I think, said, well, it's amazing that you could feel the energy of their trauma and everything in the physical. But think of it, when we connect with our higher guides and the higher ranges of life, how we're nurtured by that incredible experience. So you're capable of feeling all of it, whether it's in an ecstasy kind of situation or in the traumatic kind of situation. We're this open field of energy, but definitely the crew is with us for the long haul of getting this book finished and getting it out there so people can read the story. Because and going over this material, Regina and I realized there's so much that was never recorded, so many experiences that were never recorded. A lot of it on my part because the crew would just come in and talk to us about something they had learned that day, and it was personal. It wasn't necessarily something that they wanted to be shared. So they were very clear about what they felt could be shared and what they didn't want to have shared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine?
You had a little trouble in muting. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for sharing your love and compassion. And so I'm learning so much about what mediumship entails. And so I can make my own personal decisions about mediumship. And I also want to thank Seth for the message on synchronicity, because today there's been a lot of synchronicity, things that are happening that are out of the ordinary. And for the last couple of weeks, it's like, I know somebody's trying to say something. And so I just thank you for all of it. Thank you for this incredible learning experience. And I look forward to hearing and seeing and experiencing more and growing in spirituality. Just thank you so much for everything that you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Christine. Ellen and Beth?
Hi. Hi. So, two things. I want to, every time I see the two of you, it just lights my heart. I just am filled with love and appreciation for both of you. And the message from Seth was particularly poignant for me today. Jeannie, thank you very, very much. That made an enormous amount of sense. And thank you to Seth. Beth is new to all of this, although both of us have these, we're both very connected. And her father, I'm here in South Dakota with her. Her father was someone who worked with NASA in developing, actually was the first camera that actually was able to send pictures from space.
The gold camera, my dad invented that.
Wow.
And so I'm here with Beth, and when I saw that this is you guys were going to be on this thing, I was really excited. One of the things she asked me, Regina, when you were speaking particularly about the experience with Rick, was, does this form of mediumship open up other people, yourselves or other people who hear it, to something that's evil? And that's something that
It makes me worry about you guys doing this. It's a good thing.
Oh.
But I don't mean to make you feel bad about what I'm asking. I just want to know that you're safe.
Well, that again, we have to trust our guides. We have first of all, our protections and all of the entities that are working with us every day, constantly. They're the ones who gatekeep for us all the time. And they're not going to bring us someone. They're just not. We can try to go there. We can do that, but both Jeanne and I have had enough experience. We've both been in this for each of us, more than 40 years for each of us. Actually, a lot longer than that. I mean, we've been doing writing and channeling in other formats other than the medium, this vocal voice. But there is a tremendous amount of trust. And I hear this probably daily, Beth, from that question, how do you know? And I know. I know.
Well, if I might add too, the thing is that you have to really know who you are. You have to really know who you are. You need to do the personal work. Each one of us, if we're going to venture into moving in and out of consciousness with other beings, we have to really know what is our stuff. And the thing is, as we work to clear ourselves and whatever traumas we have, whatever personality issues we have, we're eternal beings. So we're not necessarily pristine clear when we come in as a child. We bring stuff in to work with and to learn from. And so, one of the things that was big for me was going through my own personal journey. And that was tough because, parts of me were really clear and well developed, and other parts of me just had so much junk. And so through a process, and that's a lot of what I do now with the teaching and the clients is to really, just finish the class on knowing who we are and how to know how we put our creation together. And when we really know who we are and we take out any kind of darkness within ourselves, then we will not necessarily attract darkness to us. And that's a really important thing, because I know there are people out there that I've experienced them. Well, I just surround myself in the light and everything's good. Well, it's not true. And that's why when we clean through the shield, we're clearing of toxic streams, discordant thought forms, AI contamination, which is big stuff. There's all sorts of stuff energetically flying around the cosmos. And you get to learn that level, that baseline of your own clarity. And then when something enters into your field, you're going to feel, oh, that feels wonderful. And you can't fake that. Spirit cannot fake love. You can't get deceivers coming in with love. They might do it for a second, but it doesn't last. And then you come down to that point of you're so clear in your own mind about who you are and what you want, and you have your team around you like Regina was speaking to. And then when Spirit comes to you, you have that knowing, this is good. Or you have a knowing of, oh, I don't really like that. I mean, there's times when I'll call on Mary Bassett. She's one of our team members that's been with us since the very beginning. And she's taught me a lot. She's given me a lot of things that I've incorporated. We work a lot together. And you just know when something's off. And then you have the tools that you've developed, a lot more tools than we're sharing with you right now. But those things are all important in the circle to be able to know, okay, I'm really stepping up the ladder in the light, and I'm not attracting anything dark. And then if something, silly comes your way, you learn the tools of how to dismiss it and how to remove it so that it doesn't, play with you. Well, it's a really good point.
Does that help?
I wonder
Does
if
that help, Beth?
Mary Beth, would you like to add something to that? Perhaps you from your experience. I know you're very much part of the team.
No, I don't think so. Not really. It's just that to reiterate what Jeannie says, you really have to know. I don't have the sight or the vision like Jeannie and Regina do, or I don't know if I feel like I've came from a background of doing healing work and hands-on body work and stuff for a lot of years, but and I know that I've channeled energies, but I feel things very, very, I'm very sensitive in feeling energies. And so I immediately know, because I'm so familiar with my own energies, that I immediately know if something is not good or is not right, or, and then I can question that. So that's it.
Here right now.
Sorry,
Thank you for listening to Ellen ask my question. It's just it went to my heart, and it also made me worry about you guys with what you're doing, and hopefully that nothing bad can come to what.
So we've been through that. We're on the other side of it now.
Good.
Been there, done that.
I think one of
Thank you.
one of the wonderful things is that you guys have each other, that you are part, that have that group energy and that protection. I think that the fact that you're able to support each other must make a huge difference. And I think this is where, the teams come in. Would you like to speak to that?
I will.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to, how would I like to say this? Well, just as we have been trusting our team players, those on the other side, and those surrounding us, there is a certain amount of trust that you are putting into us by inviting us onto your show. You're trusting us that we're going to share with you the truth. And hopefully you are feeling a sense of, I don't think that's right, or I think that's spot on. You are having your own discernment. I look at Steve. I'm going to call your name out, Steve. And I wonder what's going on in his mind. Is he there? Is he asleep? Is he thinking about this? Is he receiving any information? And then I think, what brought us all in here? Everybody is looking at and listening to us with discernment. They're all wondering about us. And that's good. That's a really good sign that you're thinking about this. That means that you're making decisions. You're judging in a way that is saying, how does this feel within me? And when you do that, that's where it begins. How does this feel within me? Because you're working with your own vibration, and you're talking about yourself, and you're honoring yourself, because you certainly don't want me spilling wine on you. You don't want me to leave any dirt on you. You don't want me to, track through your house, leaving bad vibrations. And that is the same thing with spirit. When you ask spirit to come around you, you certainly don't want them in you and leaving any bad junk behind. And I don't know how else to say that, but now I've got Steve on the line here, and I want him to respond directly.
Come on, Steve.
I know nothing. Was listening to Seth Speaks just before we started the program today.
Synchronicity.
Well, I had it pinned on one of my tabs for a couple of weeks. It's one of those where the guy starts reading the book for you, so my lazy eyes don't have to try to read. So I enjoy Seth a lot.
Well, that's good.
For those of you who don't know, Steve does fabulous book reviews. He's got a website with fabulous reviews of Spirit Magazine.
We published the Inner Voice magazine together. It's just been released a few hours ago. I'll put a link in the chat. It's free. It's free.
It's a free magazine online, the Inner Voice magazine, and Steve always has a book review in it, which are absolutely fabulous. Definitely worth checking out.
I don't know about fabulous, but
they are fabulous, Steve. I look at them all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy, Dan, Regina, and Jeannie. Wonderful. Not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. Not for the newbies either. I think this is quite advanced stuff here. I'd just like to ask, since NASA knows about psychics, what has been their reaction to you and the Cosmic Voices Network?
Well, we haven't really gotten anything from them recently. I think that damage was done a while back.
Yeah, there's too many of us now.
With the internet and all the things that are up, I think it's not that interesting. I know that I've said this before too, that in the 80s there was a whole PSYOPs division that was programmed to find the energetic signature of psychics in the United States, to obliterate them, to knock them off their game, to disorient them. And unfortunately, that has still happened even recently with some well-known people. I guess I shouldn't say they're not bothering us, but for right now, that's one of the reasons why we go through all the stuff with this, the shields, because that was given to us by spirit, and changing the psychic signature every time we work, so that the lights up. It's like, when you do the work, your light's out. It's out there for everybody. It's like when the moths go to those little things outside, outdoors in the summertime, and you hear zap, because they're all drawn to the light, and that's great. But then we kind of cloak it, I guess you might say, after we've had some good experiences, and keep it to a minimal, so we keep our light to a nice hum, but we don't have to have it out there all the time. And that's all the years of experience that Beth was concerned about in terms of, getting in trouble or not being protected. We've gone through all of that. I mean, the stuff we've gone through was, really unbelievable. And I know others in their own way, but that's what's taught us how to be aware and how to be strong in that. But so far, because of the time and day it is, so many years later, it's not as threatening, and I don't think it will be. We're different people, and NASA's still making all sorts of stupid mistakes anyway, so same old story.
Also wanted, also in response to Christina's question, again, it's my impression that at least some of the politics that were hidden around the Challenger disaster got defused by the public hearings that occurred subsequently, or at least some of these things came out about NASA's priorities or the pressure to launch and all the dirt behind that. So
and with the Columbia crew too.
Right now, I wasn't aware of the hearings following Columbia as much as I was aware of the Challenger hearings.
And do you think that's had an impact on the current situation with our two astronauts marooned in space, where they're being much more careful about risking their lives?
Well, the choice to send them back on the SpaceX capsule, I think is really their only choice, because they've lost so much face, and certainly Boeing has, and it's a big question there, because Boeing is all we've got in a way, in some ways, and to see the kind of chaos that's erupted around coming to terms with all the irresponsibility and the opportunism that takes place, certainly in many big businesses and corporate environments. So I think it's good that this is all being exposed now, but NASA's having a tough time, because they bear, I would say, equal responsibility for this, because they should have had their inspectors on the scene. And if they did, and the inspectors were not really raising hell about it, then there's some accountability to be had going forward. But we'll see. Hopefully the Boeing capsule will come down all right. That will be, that would help to quiet things. But this is, given the level of our primitive human technology, I think it's quite remarkable that we've done as far as we have. You look at the longevity of the space station and other efforts that are going on. Some of them I think are misguided. I think Elon Musk's plans to go to Mars and populate Mars are a bit premature, to say the least.
He can go.
Well, yeah, any day. Bye. And yes, his company, which is not him, his company has done some remarkable things. So, we wait and we watch. What can we do?
Hyacinth?
Yes, I was putting a question in the chat about if anybody had any sort of feeling about the Starliner, because now they say that there's some strange noises coming from there.
It's probably all the dead astronauts going in there and haunting everybody.
I do imagine that they're watching with great interest.
Yeah, very
Disgust.
very.
Well,
that's the big thing. The first few months, and it continued, they were all so pissed off about feeling like they meant nothing to the NASA higher ups, that they would launch, like you say, because of the push and sacrifice them. They didn't mean anything. Ultimately, they didn't. And that was so really hard for the 7 Challenger crew members. They were very, very vocal about it to us and very unhappy. So they taught us everything except how to die.
Mm.
Well, I mean, the same thing must happen to soldiers, to people in warfare. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That whole feeling of being cannon fodder.
Yeah, I just wanted to recommend for anyone who hasn't yet run into this, the book Postmortem Journal. It was written by T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, several years after his passing, through British medium Jane Sherwood. Anyway, Postmortem Journal. It's still in print, and it's a wonderful account, a very articulate account of Lawrence's own experience of coming over suddenly in a motorcycle accident, and of his finding himself in a rather dark atmosphere, and how when he asked for help, he was rescued and taken to a healing environment. And that's how the story starts. But of course, everyone's experience over there is different, but I think this is a really interesting and engaging book, and I highly recommend you can read it in a couple of evenings. That's Postmortem Journal, and the nominal author is Jane Sherwood.
And while we're on books, I'd like to recommend to everybody Sonny Burgess' book. Sonny Burgess was here a couple of weeks ago, and Sonny has done spent more than 10 years researching the old trance mediums. The medium, I'm talking about people like Bertha Harris and people, the great trance mediums in England. And he's got chapters on all of them. And it's absolutely fascinating material how trance mediumship has evolved. One of the things that I was reading is many of the trance mediums would take half an hour to come out of trance. It was like, it was such a big deal. And it was very, very close to physical mediumship.
In the Stephen book, when you know that Tom Ashman went into trance and Stephen spoke to him, at one time he said, now I must think of Thomas and give him back his body, because there was a danger they could overstep it.
I have a quick thing to say about that. Thank you for bringing that up. In the late spring of '86, one afternoon, I think school must have been out because Tom is home from teaching and our boarder was there and the kids were out playing. And I was talking to Regina about this. I believe it was Greg Jarvis. Pretty sure it was. I missed, because I didn't write it down. But I do remember the event. And so he had something that because they all went off and started researching. And they'd come to home base and tell us, what they had discovered, because they wanted to find out what blew them up, what was going on, what was wrong. And so they would go in and they were following the guys around that were putting the shuttle together and the hangars and just haunting the halls. And I don't remember what it was that he found, but he found something and he wanted to share it with us. And so I went into trance. It was so easy to do because they were around all the time. It was like, we just kind of walked in and out of each other after a while because it was just it was just how we were, like Seth. I mean, he'd come in when I'm not driving, but Tom would be driving in the car and I would, so Seth, and Seth's talking to Tom. It's like, but anyway, this one afternoon, our boarder had sometimes a difficult time reading the room. And so Greg was very intently talking about the situation, and Bill said, I'll get right back to you. And he went off when he got something, he brought it back. And he grabbed my hands and he put this like a model of something in my hands. And it was the Challenger shuttle, like he'd gotten a model of it, and he put it in my hands. And Greg, when he figured out what it was, absolutely lost it. And just said, Bill, why would you do that? Because Greg was still so traumatized from the accident. And then this guy comes over and sticks the stuff in his hand. And he said, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And he was so mad. He left my body so quickly. I feel like something had just been ripped out of me. So when you talk about physical mediumship and that feeling, absolutely, because I was just, I felt like, I couldn't catch my breath. I was just so disoriented. It was very physically painful and uncomfortable. Of course, we stopped the session and it took me a moment, and then I had to go walk around the blocks several times to get my energy back into my body because he ripped himself out of me so quickly and so abruptly, which they didn't usually do. We always took time, to ease out of each other's field. That was a very uncomfortable experience. So fortunately that only happened to me once like that. But when it does, it's scary.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we finish? Well,
Not me. I don't have any.
I think we're all just absolutely stunned and in awe
Exhausted,
and
Wendy.
you must
We're
be exhausted. You must be exhausted. Well, thank you so much for sharing your energy and for taking the time to do this. But
I'm thinking you're exhausted.
No, I think we're all good to go. We just want more. We're looking forward to learning more. Every time you come on, we learn so much.
Well, my ego wants to know this.
Well,
And
absolutely.
my ego wants to know all of this, you know. So I'm going to put Dan in the hot seat a minute.
All right.
Dan, Mr. Skeptic, had been on the fence, and he had created such a brick wall between believe or non-belief, real or not real. I don't know. That, I mean, he had a full causeway that he was walking back and forth debating whether he was going to believe anything. So what made you, where was the turning point for you, Dan, to join the cosmic team?
Well, I felt that I was already joined the first time I met you guys. And that was at the wonderful channeling of the Native American elders back in, it was 2017, I believe.
Mhm.
So I was on board. And my skepticism, I try to keep my skepticism balanced. People ask me what I believe and what I don't believe. And my answer is generally that I don't need to believe anything at all unless I actually have to take an action in my real life on the basis of it. Short of that, I can believe or disbelieve, and I'm fine holding things neutrally and just taking in the information and evaluating and taking in the experiences and evaluating them. I tell people I have a huge maybe box. It's a mile wide. And
You
most
can't
of
connect the dots.
What?
You can't connect dots with a maybe box.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And that's the point. Over on one end of the maybe box, I have a very small yes box. It's small and it has a very high threshold of entry. Okay, but I do have a yes box. On the other end of the maybe box is a field of manure that stretches out over the horizon halfway to Alpha Centauri. And that's just the human condition, right? Information is just information. What binds me to you and to others who are close to me is just the love and the experience of what we're all involved in together. And while I constantly question things, it doesn't mean my heart's not in it. So you might say parts of me are on both sides of it, but I'm nowhere near a knee-jerk skeptic. I'm pseudo-skeptic, I call them. But there's so much stuff flying around in the world on so many levels that I always have to check in with myself about what to believe believe well enough for it to actually have an effect in my life. That's where belief counts, I think.
Mhm.
Other than that, I mean, there's so much that flies through the air. I just let it in one side and out the other by. Especially in ideologically, politically, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
There's very little of it that we can actually act on.
Right.
And I call myself a pragmatist.
Dan, I have a tentative file. If something, it's like some things, okay, that may be true.
Yeah.
But I'm not certain of it, so I'm going to put it in the tentative file. And then also Krishnamurti always used to say, don't believe in anything, find out.
No.
Yeah.
Well, this is where I think in all of these areas that science has to come to terms with its own soul and understand what true science is really about. And science happens on all the levels of our being, learn, discover, find out, discern, right? It's not all just mush. There are things that we need, as Jeanne and Regina have so articulately said today. There's stuff you accept, there's stuff you reject. You do have boundaries and
big boundaries.
Yeah. So outside those boundaries, it doesn't matter to me whether stuff is believable or not, because there's nothing I can do about it. So I try not to get hung up on what I believe or not. I mean, I have groups of friends who are ideologically one way or another about this and that. And I enjoy relating to them and spending time with them. but what they believe is their problem. You know, I express myself, I share my views regarding this or that polarity about vaccines and this. I ask everyone, we have to make decisions in our lives. What's the risk-benefit ratio? Neither side is interested in that. They're each interested in their pro or their con. I say, hey, you know, there are X million people die in traffic accidents every year, right? Does that mean we should never drive a car? And we didn't think of that, you know.
Thank
So
you, Dan.
belief and disbelief, I think it's important to be aware of it and also not to get too overwrought and hung up about it.
Right.
And just, you know, be on the journey, love everyone on the journey, and know yourself as well as you can.
Know
It's a work in progress.